This is how easy it is to install your first Linux operating system and create your own home lab environment using only one ISO file and one virtualization application like VirtualBox. Hello and welcome to Unicast-Administrators. Today we are going to achieve your first milestone, mastering Linux. So stay tuned and watch what comes next.
Since Linux it's open source, that means that it's free. And because of that there are hundreds and hundreds of distributions, and it might be difficult for you to choose the best distribution for you. And really it's hard to choose a specific distribution because there are distributions focused on gaming, distributions focused on production, development, and many more. For example, we can look here at the most commonly used distributions, and for example for security we have Kali Linux, which is mainly used for cybersecurity projects like vulnerability testing, penetration testing, and many more. There are also the Debian distributions like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, which can be used in a desktop home environment, but also Ubuntu has its distribution for servers where you can have development and many more. We also have the Fedora project, and from Fedora project multiple other distributions like CentOS are mirroring most of the Fedora development. Same goes for Rocky Linux, and Red Hat usually implements stuff that has been first tested on Fedora, and after they make sure that everything is safe and it's working properly, only after that it's taken and implemented in Red Hat. So we can have a look into deciding what distribution to choose. Personally, I would recommend CentOS Stream or Rocky Linux for developing new skills on Linux, but you can also go with Ubuntu, and Ubuntu has multiple distributions and flavors. Ubuntu calls them flavors, and many of them are designed specifically for a particular thing. For example, Kubuntu, it's mainly used for entry level, for someone that wants to make the transition from Windows to Linux. So this would be a great example and a great distribution for you to take and try it out. And we have other flavors for Ubuntu like Ubuntu, Ubuntu Bungee, Ubuntu Cinnamon, and we also have one that I like a lot and I personally use on my personal laptop, which is Ubuntu Studio, which basically it's a Linux distribution, a Debian distribution that comes pre-installed with a lot of applications that are specifically designed for content creation, like editing videos and many more. So this is also a very nice one to have. You can install it, but because this is a channel focused on developing new Linux skills, and because Red Hat Linux usually comes with a paid license, the most close distributions that you can use to develop your skills that you can apply on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, CentOS, Fedora, and Rocky Linux, because they all share the same kernel, and most of the development done in Fedora it's taken and then placed in CentOS or Rocky, and they are further developed, and after that they are also taken to Red Hat. So all four of them go hand in hand, so I would pick one between CentOS, Fedora, or Rocky Linux. Fedora tends to be more unstable because a lot of things are being developed on Fedora, so I would personally go with Rocky Linux or CentOS. So let's presume that we are going to take Rocky Linux. What we would need to do is to go on their official webpage, which is rockylinux.org, and we would click on download 9.3, which is their most new version, and from here we would need to pick the ISO download. So for that, let's go for DVD for x86 x64, which is for the CPU architecture. So let's go for DVD, and this will start downloading, and it's going to download the entire ISO, which will take some time, and we are gonna come back to this once it's completed. And we are also going to need to have application, an environment where we can use that ISO and virtualize the server to create a virtual server. And there are many tools that you can use. You can use Hyper-V directly from Windows. You can use different other virtualization softwares like VMware, but one that it's free to use, and I use it all of the time when I have to create a virtual environment where I need to test multiple things with different servers. It's VirtualBox, which is created by Oracle, and it's free. So we can go on virtualbox.org, which I'm gonna add it to the description of the video as well. And from here we go on download VirtualBox 7.0, and because I'm on a Windows host, which basically should show how easy it is to install Linux on Windows as a virtual server, I'm gonna go with Windows hosts, and we are gonna be redirected quickly to the download page. So my files, both the ISO for Rocky Linux and the VirtualBox installation file, have finished downloading, and I already copied my ISO from the downloads folder to another folder where I keep all my ISO files, because I like to have one location for the ISO files. So you will have yours here. You can move it anywhere where you want, as long as you know where you placed it, so you can use it later on. Let's install the VirtualBox and show you the process involved into installing VirtualBox. So here we are prompted with a welcoming screen. Here we don't have to do anything else, just hit next. You can change a few options for the installations, like the USB support, VirtualBox, networking support. I would recommend to leave them as they are, because we need them and we will have to use them later on. So leave them as they are, just hit next, and now you can see that we are prompted with a warning message, which basically says that VirtualBox has to install an additional driver for the networking part, because it will also create a virtual network adapter inside our computer that can be used later on to create virtual networks, and that will also allow us to create different types of network adapters to have communication to the internet, or to restrict communication to the internet, and so much more. But also, while this is created, it will temporarily disable the network, the internet connection on our system, on our server, or on our computer from where we are currently installing this. I'm perfectly fine with that, so we are gonna click yes, and here it's telling us that we are missing some dependencies and core packages, and basically just some small applications that are needed. So we are gonna hit yes here. We are perfectly fine with that as well, and we are going to click install, and this will take a few moments, and I'm gonna get back as soon as this is finished. So as soon as the installation was finished, I have opened my VirtualBox, and this is how VirtualBox looks. You can see here that I already have 5 servers created in my virtual environment, and these are 5 servers of different distributions that I use to basically test different things, learn new skills, test a bunch of things around. But mainly this is how VirtualBox looks, and I have this here created because I have never deleted the files of the virtual servers, and that's on purpose because I wanted them to be here. I did not want to remove the entire environment at all. In order for us to create a new server from VirtualBox, we have to go to the top left of the screen, and we click on machine, and here we click on new. We are going to give a name to our server that we want to create here. I'm going to name mine server 6 because I would like to keep the same structure and the same naming convention that I have here. And because I already know in advance that I'm going to install a Rocky Linux, I'm gonna add here server 6-rocky.example.com. Now you can add here any name that you want. You can use anything because this is not the actual name of the server inside the operating system. We are going to have a look at that later on, but I use this so that it can be easier for me to pick stuff up. So I would also like to change the folder where the files for the server that we are going to create are going to be saved. So I don't want to have it here on the C drive. I'm actually going to go and save them on another location, which is this one. And here I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to name it server6-rocky.example.com. So we can choose this folder, and here is where our files for the new server will be stored. And we also have to specify what ISO image are we going to use, what Linux operating system we are going to install. And you have to go and choose this from the location where you have saved your ISO file. For example, I already moved mine here into the disk D, VirtualBox and ISO, where I keep all my ISO files. And we are going to install a Rocky 9.3, which is the ISO that we downloaded earlier. But based on the ISO that you downloaded, you can go with whichever you want. So I'm going to choose Rocky 9.3, hit open, and here it already detected it automatically as a Linux type. As we can see here, it's grayed out. I cannot change that. And it also took the version Red Hat 84-bit. Now, why did it do that? Well, if you remember in the beginning of the video, I said that Fedora, Red Hat, CentOS, Stream, and Rocky Linux, they all share the same distribution and kernel, but they have their different things customizable to their needs and to their liking. But strictly speaking about the kernel, they use the same kernel, the same architecture, same structure, and that's why this has been detected automatically. Oh, and by the way, Oracle Linux, it's also similar in structure. At least Oracle 8 was similar to Red Hat, Fedora, CentOS, and Rocky Linux. So this is why I cannot change this, because the VirtualBox already identified the ISO that we are using as a Red Hat architecture and that it's a Linux. Now what we have to do is to go on next, and here you are prompted to give a username and a password for the VirtualBox. It's some sort of an administrator account that you could use to manage this from VirtualBox. Now you are not obligated to have here, but it does actually force us to have it, so I'm actually going to leave this as it is. We are going to get rid of it later on. And here we have the name that we offered it earlier and the domain. Now the domain is actually added automatically as myguest.virtualbox.org. I don't want that. What I do want is to take this, so I want to have it like this as example.com. And let's hit next. And now here we are prompted to add the resources that we want to assign to our server. Basically this means how much CPU and how much memory do you want to give to your server. And because we are going to install this as a graphical user interface server, I'm going to give it more RAM, but you can go with as low as it already set up here. You can only give it 2 GB and 1 CPU. That depends on your needs, but I'm just gonna give it a few more. So let's say 6.4. Now this might not be the best round up number, but I'm just gonna leave it as it is. So I'm gonna give it 6 GB of RAM memory, and I'm gonna go with 3 CPU cores, and we are going to hit next. And here we are prompted to create the disk size. Now the disk size can be as much as you want, and it can be even lower than this, but the recommended values, I would say that you should keep it at 20, so you can have some more free space available to play around with it later on. And I'm gonna give the size, I'm gonna keep it as 20 GB, and I'm also gonna tick this box because I want the entire disk to be allocated and to not grow dynamically. Basically this means that if we want to give 20 gigabytes, the entire 20 gigabytes of the disk space should be allocated at once. If we don't tick this, this basically means that we are going to create a dynamic disk that can grow up to a maximum size of 20 gigabytes, but the initial size that we will see would vary. It might be 8 gigabytes or 9 gigabytes, not the entire 20 value. So I don't want that to happen. It doesn't really affect us in any way, but I just prefer it to see it like this. So I'm just gonna hit next, and here we are prompted with a summary where we can see everything that we chose, and in case we don't like something and we want to change a value, we can always go back. But I like how it looks, so I'm just gonna hit finish, and now you'll see that it kind of froze for a bit. That's normal, and now it's going to create our medium / our virtual server. And once this is completed, the server will appear here on the left side, and we will be able to power it on and proceed with the operating system installation. So once this is done, we can start building our VM. Now to speed this up, I'm gonna pause this, and I'm gonna resume it as soon as it finishes. See you in a second. The setup and the creation of the server 6 has actually finished, but I did not have the chance to actually show how the message looks, because as soon as this finished, the server started automatically, and I actually forgot that this is happening. So this is how it will first look. It will start automatically, and this is the new window of the server itself. But as you can see here, we have an issue. We have a warning and a checksum error. So at this very moment, this cannot boot. Let's close this down. As soon as we hit X, we have some options for the power state, what we want to do. We don't want to save the state of the virtual machine as it is. I'm just gonna power it off. So we are gonna hit OK, and as soon as this is done, we are gonna right click on the server, and we are gonna go to settings, and here we have a few different things that we can set up. Now the general part, we can skip it for now. These are just some general things. We will first focus on the system, where we have here, for example, options for the processor. Acceleration, it's for paravirtualized. Basically it's a method used for different virtualization environments. If we want to use KVM virtual machines or Hyper-V virtual machines or legacy, which are old ISOs, but we are going to leave it as default. We don't really care about this now, but broadly speaking, this is what it's used for. The processor, again, we're not going to touch it because we already made the setup. What we are going to focus first is the boot order. We don't want floppy, so we are gonna disable this, but we would like first the boot order, at least for the beginning, because we are going to install the operating system. We would like optical, which is basically the ISO, the DVD file. We'd like it to be the first one. So first we want to boot from the ISO image, and then we can leave hard disk as it is. For storage, we don't really have to do anything here. This is the disk itself, and this is the virtual machine file. But what we would like to do though, it's to make sure that the ISO is attached, which we will do later as soon as we power on the server. But the one thing that we also have to check from here, it's the network part. So as we can see here on the network part, which basically it's the menu where we can control the network adapters for our virtual server. The first adapter is automatically set to NAT, which is network address translation, which is used to translate names to IP addresses or vice versa, from IP addresses to host names or just names. Now for the first adapter, we would want to choose bridge adapter. Basically bridge means that we can create like a tunnel. Think of it like an actual bridge from inside our virtual server to the computer where we installed the virtual server. In our case, it would be our computer in our VirtualBox. Having this adapter would allow us from inside the virtual server to communicate through the internet externally. So if we want to access websites like Google or Yahoo or anything like that from inside the virtual server, we have to have bridge adapter enabled. So for adapter 1, make sure enable network adapter is ticked, and here from attach to change it to bridge adapter. The name of the network adapter itself, it's chosen automatically. You can play with this around and you can change it to whatever you want. If you want to use wireless instead of wired connection, go for it. But VirtualBox got to the point where it's smart enough to automatically detect this, and you can leave the setup just like this, just the default that was automatically detected. And another thing that we would like to do is to have the second adapter enabled, and inside this one we are going to use internal network. Basically this would allow us from our server 6 to communicate with other servers. Now you are not obligated to do this now, you can do it anytime later on, but I would like to do it for myself now, just so that I don't forget about this option and I don't have any surprises, which I can rectify later on, but I want to eliminate this. So the most important part, focus on adapter 1, bridge adapter, leave it as it is. We can change it later on, but for now, because this is a basic installation for the first time, we are gonna leave it as it is. And we had to power off the server because otherwise we would have not been able to edit those options. So let's double click on our server, let's power it back on. As we can see here, it's powering on, and at this very moment we might still get another error, which we still do. So what we need to do is go here for devices, optical devices, and here tick the ISO. Make sure that this is ticked. Select the ISO file that you want to install. I have two others because I have used them in the past, and we are going to focus on Rocky because this is the one that we chose. And now let's go to VM, to machine, sorry, and from here let's click on reset. I don't want this to show again, so let's just hit on reset. And there you go, it automatically detected our ISO file, and this is how it first looks. We are going to make this a bit bigger, so let's go with a resolution of 150 so we can see this better. By the way, one trick inside VirtualBox is that as soon as I click inside the virtual machine on the black screen, as you see here, you don't see my cursor at all. And if you look on this window on the right bottom of the screen, you see there is a right control enabled. Basically that means that I cannot take my mouse outside of this box anymore now. In order to be able to use that again, you just have to press the control key from your keyboard, and as soon as I do that, you see I can see again the mouse cursor, and now I can go ahead and have a look through my computer and use again this. Let's get back to our installation. So this is how the main window, the first window for the Rocky Linux installation looks like, and we have three options. Now the first one, as the name says, it's to install Rocky Linux 9.3. The second one, it's to test the media and then install Rocky Linux. Basically this option ensures that the ISO will first be tested, and if all the tests are successful, the operating system will be installed after that. And the third option, it's mainly used for troubleshooting, as the name says. If I hit on it now, enter, as you can see I have options to boot from local drive, run a memory test, rescue your Rocky Linux system. This is a fancy way of actually saying that we go into a specific menu inside the operating system where we can actually troubleshoot issues that we have with our servers, and as soon as we rectify those issues, we can get back out of that menu and we can boot our server safely. But because we know exactly what we want to do, we are gonna hit the first option, which is install. So I'm using my arrow keys to go through that, and as soon as I am on top of one option, you see that it's going to be highlighted in white. So now I'm on the third one. I'm gonna hit upper arrow twice, and now I'm on install Rocky Linux 9.3. So in order to start the installation, we have to make sure that the first option is highlighted in white. Again, you can use your arrow keys to navigate through this, and we are gonna press enter from our keyboard, and immediately the installation will start shortly. But we can choose how to install it from a graphical user interface, which will be loaded in a few moments. For now, we can see that we have a screen where a lot of things are starting automatically. Well, this is done by the systemd manager, which will have to be discussed on a separate video, because this is an entire discussion on itself, and we don't want to keep this video clip too long. So what you need to know on this screen is that systemd starts a lot of modules and services, and it loads automatically a lot of drivers that are going to be used on the operating system itself. So this is what happens now. Systemd starts a lot of things that we need in order to make sure that the operating system runs smoothly. And in a few moments we'll be prompted with a graphical user interface from where we can choose different things that we want to install. And here it is, the installer is starting. So now, after everything has finished loading and starting, we are prompted with the installation screen, the first part of the installation screen, where we are prompted with a welcome page where we can choose the language and the keyboard of the operating system. Now I am going to leave it as it already is, which is the English language and the keyboard in English United States, but you can change it to anything that you would like or that you need. As soon as you have that, hit on continue to the right bottom of the screen, and here we are prompted with the actual installation menu from where we can choose a lot of things. So let's start from top left. We already discussed about the keyboard and the language support on the page that we had earlier, but we can also change the time and date. Now I'm gonna leave it to United States on the time zone used for New York. I like the way it's already set up, and we can also take advantage of the network time, which basically means that the operating system will install an additional package that will make sure that the time is synchronized automatically. You can change that, but I'm going to leave it as it is because I like the way it looks. You can change it to anything you like. Also, by the way, if you don't want this, you can disable it and you can set up your time zone automatically, and you can use these menus, but as I said, I like how it looks, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is. For the software, our installation source, it is local media because we use our ISO file, so we are not gonna touch that. You can always go in it and change it to anything from network installation or picking up the ISO file through a shared network storage, but we are not gonna touch that. I'm gonna leave it as it is, and let's discuss about software selection, which basically, as soon as you click it, you see you have different options to install your operating system. Now, because we went with a Rocky Linux server, this is not necessarily designed for home usage. This is more like building stuff inside this operating system, or using it to manage your infrastructure, or using it to build your own FTP server or your web server. And we have options like server with graphical user interface, where we can pick different things to be installed automatically. We have a simple server that has just basic functionalities, where, for example, we can choose to install a basic web server. I'm not gonna do that, but if you want to, you can do that. I'm just gonna disable this option. We also have a minimal install, which basically means that the operating system will be installed without a graphical user interface, and it will be installed without any additional package on itself, on the operating system. And this is where the beautiful world of Linux comes into play. And whenever you see a bunch of IT guys on YouTube or movies or anywhere else working on a black terminal on a command line interface, this is what it's actually going to be installed. Think of it just like that. It's a server where you don't have windows, where you don't have things to click on. Everything you control from a terminal, where you only run commands, text commands, and you edit files like that. This is what minimal install is. Workstation is, as the description says, it's a user-friendly desktop for system or laptops and PCs. You can use this to use it as a day-to-day operating system that you can use on your laptop, I don't know, to browse the internet, watch movies on, and so many. You can use this if you want this installation to be specifically designed for that. But for us, because we are focusing on developing your Linux skills, but at the same time because we also want to keep things easy, we are going to go with a server with GUI, which is a graphical user interface installation. So we are going to install it as it is, because what you do in minimal install you can also do in server with GUI. The only advantage here is that you actually have things that you can click on and you can open them as they are, like that. So we click on done, and another important thing is installation destination. Basically this just represents where you want your operating system to be installed. So we have here our 20 gigabytes disk that we created earlier, and it's already automatically detected. But if you would have had different virtual disks or different physical disks, if you are using this installation on a laptop or on a PC, you would have been able to choose from different SSDs or hard disk drives. And another important configuration would be the storage configuration, and this is actually something that we are gonna do ourselves. I'm gonna go with custom, and I would like to make additional space available, so we don't want that. We just want automatic custom. So I'm gonna hit on custom. Basically this means that the operating system will allow me to determine how much space I should give for each and every single mount point separately. How much space I should give for the swap space, which is like the page file on Windows. If you don't want to go through that step, you can leave it on automatic, and the operating system will do that automatically for you. But because this is a channel dedicated to helping you learn Linux and building your skills, we are gonna go with custom. We are gonna go through those options. Now, as soon as we select custom and from the left hand side of the screen we click on done, we'll be prompted to our new screen where we have to manually set up the mount points. And we can also see that the first option here, it's called LVM, which it's a way of virtualizing the storage space so that we can create a virtual pool of the space from that disk that can be used for several mount points, and we can also assign that storage pool space to another disk. And we could also go with standard partitioning. Now this would be the most basic setup if we use standard partition, and we actually want to use LVM, because on LVM you can make sure that you have your data stored safely and you don't have any interruptions. In case something goes wrong, we can always restore it back. But in order to be able to explain this in a proper way, let's have a quick look at the small diagram that I made here in order to show the mount points. Well, a mount point is simply described as a directory to access data stored on hard drives, and you can also assign from one simple disk or from different disks. You can use space for only the root mount point from the disk SDA1, or for home from disk SDA2, or for var from disk SDA3. So basically a mount point points to a location inside the file system, inside the operating system, that can use different space from the same disk or from different disks. And to have a more easy example that we can understand, for example, I went into my server 3 from my home lab, and if we do the command lsblk, which stands for list block devices, we can see that here I have my first disk, which is called dev-sda, with a total size of 20 gigabytes. And from this disk I have created the first partition, which is dev-sda1, and it has a total size of 1 gigabyte, and that one I have assigned it to the boot mount point. But you see, this is created as a standard partition. I have inside the partition 1 from disk dev-sda the mount point boot that uses 1 gigabyte. On the second partition I have created a logical volume manager, an LVM setup, and from the second partition of the disk 1 I have two different locations using the same LVM. The first one is for the root mount point, where I'm taking the space from disk dev-sda from the second partition, and I gave it a size of 17 gigabytes, and that has been linked to the root mount point. And another 2 gigabytes I have assigned to the swap space. And swap inside Linux, it's working on the same principle as page file size on Windows. Basically that means that if at some point my server runs without RAM memory, in order for the operating system to make sure that I don't lose any data, 2 additional gigabytes will be taken from the swap space. And you can give as much size as you have available here for the swap space. But because this is a basic server, I just went with 2 gigabytes for the swap. And to come back to our mount points discussion, here for example we have the root mount point that has a total size of 17 gigabytes. If I do a df-age, which stands for disk free, and -age is for human readable, so we can see the actual size of the mount points in human readable, we can see that for the LVM hosting this mount point, from a total size of 17 gigabytes, I have used only 1.8 gigabytes, and I still have 16 free gigabytes. And the mount point root, it's where everything starts on Linux. If I go into the directory root with cd/ and I do an ls-l, we can see that we have different locations. These are called directories, and you can create a mount point for each and every single one. And because everything starts from the root directory, which is /, we can have a quick look at boot, the boot directory. So boot directory, even though it's located on the first partition from the disk, we can actually see it underneath the root directory, because everything starts from here. And now, going back to our server, we have to create just that. Now, let me get rid of the server from the background so we don't get distracted by that one. And to set up our server space or our MountPoints space, we have to click on this plus, and here we can choose our locations. So for example, for our /root MountPoint, we can give it a desired capacity. You can do that in gigabytes or on megabytes or whatever format you want. I will go with 3 gigabytes for the root MountPoint. Now you will see that I typed in capital G, lowercase I, and capital B. This stands for gigabytes. That's the term used on Linux, but you can just type in 3 Gs, and as soon as you hit add MountPoint, you see it automatically created an LVM device type with a size of 3 gigabytes, and that will be assigned to the MountPoint /root. The file system that will be created is the XFS file system. You can think of this file system the similar way you think of NTFS for Windows or FAT32, that it's used to be able to read files from both Windows and Linux. But what you need to know here is that XFS stands for Extended File System, and this is the default format used by Rocky Linux 8. But here we have different other options, ext2 file system, the MountPoint, to also increase it but to decrease it. And now I'm gonna hit plus again, and this time I'm going to create the space for the boot MountPoint. And we don't have to give a very big size to this, because the files residing on the boot MountPoint itself are not that big, and the files that are going to stay here are the files used by the kernel and operating system itself to keep a track of all the kernel versions after each update and all the relevant files needed in order to load the grub menu, which is the bootloader in Linux, and all other relevant files. So for this, it's good enough to just give it a size of 1 gigabyte. So I'm gonna hit again add MountPoint, and this will add our second MountPoint. And let's do again like this for, let's say, home. And for the home directory, this is where the location of the profiles, the user accounts, and their data that it's stored inside their profiles is going to reside. This is where they will use the storage for their location. Think of it similar like this. It's on Windows, where you have inside the C drive you have the users directory, the users folder. This is exactly the same thing. This is what home it's used for. And let's say 2 gigabytes for now. That should be more than enough for the home directory. And let's repeat the same steps. And now /var, if we don't create it ourselves, it will be created automatically inside /root for the home directory, but I like to have that separately because it's easier to keep track of it, and in case by any chance I run without any space, I can increase just the var MountPoint and don't use any other directory for that space. So let's say 1.5 gigabytes should be enough as well. Here we have all the log files for security, the log files that the system records for each and every single action, service failure, service start, and so on. So we will go through the location of the var logs further on down the line. So for now, let's just create it as 1.5 gigabytes. And another crucial step is swap space. And as I said previously, swap is used as a space that can be used by the operating system whenever the RAM memory is used. Let's say we give this 5 gigabytes. So we hit add mount point, and now we have created everything here, and you see we still have 8.49 gigabytes of available free space, and we can use this later on to create additional directories, mount points, and we can even create a manual logical volume setup from this one. So let's leave it as it is. Again, if you don't want to go through these steps, just leave the manual partitioning. Instead of manually partitioning, keep that automatic option, and the installation will do this automatically for you. So let's click on done to save our changes, and here the operating system installation process also prompts us, and it will tell us that from the disk SDA, which is our only disk, but it's also the first disk, it will do automatically reformatting, and after that it will create and format the devices and the mount points as we set it up. So I'm perfectly fine with that. We can accept the changes, and now we are ready to proceed further, and we can discuss about KDump. This is more like an advanced topic. Long story short, this is similarly with the memory dump file inside Windows. So what this does is that if at some point the operating system will have an issue and it will crash, it will store that data inside KDump that we can use later on to analyze and troubleshoot the issues that we have found. So we can leave it enabled. I'm perfectly fine with that. If you don't want this, you can disable it. It doesn't affect your operating system in any way, so I'm just going to leave it as enabled. And let's go further for the network and host name setup. Now, as you can see here, I am using an Ethernet connection. I'm having a physical cable connected to my device where I have the virtual environment setup and where we are installing this. And if I disable this, now this will turn off my network connection. I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. And here you'll have the MAC address of your network device, the speed, and also the IP address and the default route that it goes to. Now this is assigned automatically. For security reasons, I will hide my IP address, but if you want to, you can configure this. I would leave it as it is, set up to detect it automatically to a DHCP process. We can set them manually later on. So for now, you can ignore this, you can leave it as this. Just make sure that this option here from the right hand side corner of the screen is enabled, and you can leave it as it is. Now you will see that on the left bottom of the page we have an option here to set up a host name, which would be the actual name of the server. You can set this up now, or we can set it up manually. We will change it later on in another video manually as well, so I can show you the process of changing that. If we don't set anything here, to the right side we see that the current host name is localhost. So if we don't set up here anything, it will automatically take just localhost. We can change that. So as I said, we will change it manually later on, but we can also set up here a host name. You can choose whatever name you want. I like to keep mine on the same format, the same naming convention, so that it can be easy for me to identify my own servers. So I'm just going to go with server 6-rocky.example.com. We can leave that there. Just going to hit apply, and this is it as well. This is done as well. Another option would be security profile. Now, as the name says, these are the profiles that we use for security, and this is more of an advanced topic which we will cover, but in another video, because we have to have a specific video dedicated just for that. But long story short, we can create specific profiles that have different security parameters, different setups, different settings for specific applications, for ports, for web servers, and many more. So I don't want to do that now. I'm just gonna disable this. So I'm not gonna apply any security profile, but that's perfectly fine because we still have a firewall. So if we disable this now, that doesn't mean that our server is not secured. It is. It's just that this comes down into more niche topics like port filtering and so on. Because on top of the firewall, where we actually open and whitelist ports, where we block ports, the security profile are a second security method where we can enhance our security. But we will discuss this later on. So I'm just gonna disable this and click done. And now the last step that we have is the user settings, which basically mean setting up user accounts. And the root account, it's created by default. Although it seems that on Rocky Linux now, for Rocky 9, this is disabled. On older version this was enabled by default, and we just had to set up a password. So let's set up our password for the root account. The root account in Linux, you can think of it like the administrator account in Windows. Basically that's what it is. It's an account that has security permissions and privileges to do everything and anything inside your operating system. In a corporate environment, you don't want to give root access to anybody. But because this is on our home directory, on our home environment, sorry, we can definitely use root account. So you can set up a password here. I'm just gonna type in password, the word password as it is. For whatever reason it doesn't allow me to click on that, but I'm just gonna type in my password. I'm not gonna choose to lock the account. You can choose this option, which basically means that you would be able, if you tick this option, you'll be able to SSH from outside directly on this server. I'm not gonna allow this because we will set it up manually later on. So it's up to you. I would not allow this because we will do it later on another video where we discuss higher topics for management. So as you can see here, I already pressed done after I set up my password, but because it's a weak password, it's asking me again to press done once more. So you have to press done a second time, which I will do, and we are done. The root password is set. Now we also have the option to create another user account, which we have the option to create a second account and give it root privileges, administrative privilege, or we can just leave it as a simple account. And let's go and do that. Let's create a simple account that does not have administrative privileges. Now I'm gonna name this account Johnny, because why not? And I will leave the option to require a password for Johnny to always have to be forced to enter the password whenever he wants to log in. And let's set up a password here. You can type whatever password you want. I'm just going to type in something very simply so that it can be easier. But if you are planning to use this on your laptop or on your PC, I strongly recommend to set up a strong password, not a weak password like I did. And as you can see here, I did not tick the option to make this user administrator. Now if you want to use this in your laptop or on your PC, you can make this user administrator. Basically that means that you will give Johnny root permissions to do anything that he wants inside the system, inside the Rocky Linux server. I'm not gonna do this now, but we will do it manually later on, because even if you don't set it up now, you can always give Johnny root permissions. So I'm just gonna leave it as it is. Click on done twice because again I have a weak password. And now we have done with everything. And we do have one error. We have not set up something correctly. It's telling me here that we don't have enough space in the file system for the current software selection. So in that case, I'm gonna show you exactly my mistake right here. I went with custom, but I gave it too less space for the root file system. You may be asking why I have done this. Well, this was done on purpose because I wanted to illustrate the fact that if you don't pay attention here, when you manually create your custom partitioning, you might encounter issues like this. So I've done that on purpose so that in case you cannot go further with the installation, you can have this. What we have to do is just to give more space to the root file system because everything will start here. So instead of 3 gigabytes, I'm actually going to go and give it 9 gigabytes. And that should be more than enough. So let's see. Let's click on done. Again, we are going to apply the changes. And there we go. Now we don't have any errors, any alerts, nothing. And now the begin installation button is not grayed out anymore. So we can just click on begin installation. And now the installation of the Linux operating system will start, and it will take some time, so I will pause the video and I will resume once this is done. We will have other videos where we will install other operating systems, so on the next videos installing other operating systems and other Linux distributions, we will go faster through each and every single step. But I thought that this should be an introductory video, and I thought that it's best to explain each and every single scenario, and that's why I also made on purpose that mistake with the space on the root directory. So to not keep you for too long, I'm gonna pause the video here and see you back as soon as this is done, and we will resume the process once the installation is finished. So now the installation has finished and I clicked on the reboot button that I was prompted with, and now the server is rebooting after the installation, and now we're just gonna wait for it to start. It should not take too long. So after this, your installation is completed and you can start working on your server. I'm just gonna pause here just to not keep you waiting for too long. So the installation has finished, the server has finished also rebooting, and now we are on the login screen, and here you can see the user that we created, Johnny. I can click on it and enter the password and login. You'll notice that the user root, the administrator account, it's not here. Well, if you want to sign in with that account, you just click on not listed and you will enter the username root and the password that you set up for your user, and then you'll be able to log in. I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna sign in as Johnny, the normal user that does not have any administrative permissions. Enter the password, hit enter, and now we are prompted with the login screen for Rocky Linux, the version with the graphical user interface. And because it's the first time when this user, Johnny, access the server for the first time, we are also prompted with welcome to Rocky Linux tour, and we can take a tour. And here we are prompted with the welcoming screen for Rocky Linux that will take us through each and every single tour that they have here for new users. So you can click on start and you can go through each and every single step that you want. So we can do that. We get an overview. We are prompted with different applications, presentation for each and every single thing that you can use. Since I'm not using a laptop, I don't have a touchpad, but if you're using this on a touchpad, go ahead, try, test it out, see if you like it. If not, you can change it after that. Now, one thing that I like to do every time when I'm using a graphical interface on my virtual environment is to always change the resolution so I can see everything a bit better. So everything you have to do is to right click on your desktop, go to display settings, and then you can change it to what resolution do you want to. So let's say that I go with this, hit apply, keep changes, and you might see that this is a bit too small. And that's because I used the setting to enable to resize on window resize to automatically resize the resolution of the virtual machine as well. So let's have a quick look at what Linux, at what Rocky Linux and Linux itself has to offer. So for Rocky Linux, if you went with a graphical user interface, if you go on the left hand side of the screen, if you click on activities, you'll see that you can preview the taskbar that it's always hidden. So you can choose to open your files, which are similar to like the file explorer in Windows, and from here we are directly inside our home directory, but we can have a look at what we have in downloads. We can create directories here, we can create different folders, and you can do anything else that you would like. For example, if I want to create a new folder, I'll just right click here and I will just type in new folder. You might have noticed that I'm using the description directory when I'm creating a folder. Well, that's because that's how it's called in Linux. But because the Linux community started to be more friendly with the people that are wanting to make the transition from Windows, they started to use the new folder naming convention. But the old school guys always knew that this is called as a directory, because if we go, for example, on activities on the left hand side of the screen, and from the taskbar we open the terminal, which is the Linux terminal, it's the shell, the terminal that we use to run commands. And let's also increase a bit the size so you can see better what we are doing here. For example, in our home directory, if you type pwd, which is print working directory, we can see that we are inside our home directory here, and here is the new folder that we created manually. Well, if you want to create a folder from the Linux terminal, you use the command mkdir, which stands for make directory. That's why we, the Linux guys, always use the naming convention directory. But when we say directory, we are actually referring to a folder inside the operating system in a specific location. So if we want to create our new dash folder 2, and we list again with ls-ltr, which stands for ls, it's for listing, and l, it's for long listing, t stands for time, and r, it's for recursive. Basically that means that the most recent file will always be shown at the bottom. If you don't want that, and if you want it to show on top, you just remove the r. So our new file, our new directory now, it's created here. You may have also noticed that I used a dash here and I did not use a space. Well, that's because in Linux a space is considered a character. So if I would like to create a folder called new space folder space 3, look what happens when I want to list that. It did not create one folder / one directory with the name new folder and 3. It actually created 3 separate directories. And that's a Linux trick. If you want to create a directory with this name but to also include spaces, you will have to use the word new and then put a backslash, which in Linux it's called an escape character. This means that it will escape the space, it will not consider it as a space, so it won't consider it actually as a separate file, but it will make sure that it's actually a space between words. So we type in word and then we backspace again, so that will mean that we want to keep a space there, to not wipe the space and to not treat what comes after our flashing cursor as a separate file. Then we just type in 3, and now whenever we list again, you see that we have a third directory, our third folder. It's created with a space between them, but another thing is that it is between quotes, and that's a Linux trick. Spaces in Linux, if they are not backspaced, are going to create you problems. For example, I cannot simply just cd, which is to change directory, to go from this directory to the new folder, without actually giving it its entire name. If I press tab twice, it will make a tab completion, which will show me everything that follows after the word new, and it's there. So if I hit tab twice, you see I have new folder 2 and new folder 3. If I want to go in new folder 3, I have to go like this, backspace again, and then type in the capital F and press tab, and this will automatically populate what comes after that. So with only one F, capital F, I type tab, and there we go, we have it. And now if I hit enter, I'm in the third directory. And there is also one thing that I would like to point out here. If I create a file with the word touch and I name it new file, and then I do a second one, but this time I'll do it with capital N, and I list this again, you'll see that I have two different files with the same name, but one is with uppercase and one is with lowercase. And this is also another Linux thing, because on Windows you cannot have two identical files, two files with the same name, to start with a lowercase or an uppercase. You cannot do that on Windows. In Linux you can. That's why you always have to be very careful with your naming convention. But we will discuss about the terminal and about all the Linux commands and what each and every single command does, what it represents and what it is later on another video. For now, I just wanted to show you very quickly how the graphical user interface on Rocky Linux looks. So again, you click on activities, or you press the window key like you would press the window key to bring up the menu inside Windows, and whenever you do that you are prompted with this menu, and you can just type in your words, keywords. For example, I typed in terminal and it's already there, or you can open it from here. Let's say for example that we want to go to settings, we would type settings, and we would be presented with a settings screen where we can set different things. For example, for the touchpad and mouse, or the keyboard, or any setting that you can think of. And we can also check our network settings and many more. One thing that I would like to show you before we wrap things up, it's how you update a Rocky Linux from a graphical user interface. And there are two options that you can do. The easiest option is from the graphical interface to go from the taskbar to software, or you just type in software here and it will bring it up. And here you are presented with the store for the software that you are having, or it's available to your region through this distribution. And you can click on browse software and you can go even look up for games. It will take a bit of time for me because I'm running separate connections and apparently it's working a bit slowly for whatever reason, but you can update your operating system directly from here. So on top we have three main and simple tabs. We have Explore, which is basically exploring the store. You can go for applications sorted by create. You can have a look here. Now you may have already noticed that you don't have a lot here, because Rocky Linux, it's mainly designed for infrastructure environments, for corporate environments, to build application, to develop stuff and to maintain infrastructures. It's not really built for home users, but we will have other distributions installed and those will have more features. But let's continue. So here we have the installed applications. You can uninstall them from here. and you can review which applications you have installed, and this is where you can update your operating system. And aside from the OS updates, which are the most critical ones, you also have, depending on the availability, applications that have updates available. For example, we have one for Firefox and one for Cockpit, which was installed automatically. So I can simply hit download here, or another option is to do it the Linux way. So if you want to update your system using the Linux way, you can go into your terminal and you can run the command sudo dnf update, and DNF stands for the software package that is used by this Linux distribution, and update, it's the word used to update everything. Sudo in front of it. If we have administrative privileges, it will allow Johnny to run this command, because in order to use DNF update you need to have root permissions, or at least permissions to run this specific command. We'll discuss about this in another video. But if I hit this, you will see that it will ask me for Johnny's password, which I will enter, but I will receive an error, because Johnny, if you remember from when we first created our server, has no administrative permissions, because we explicitly unticked that option. So as soon as I hit enter, I'm gonna get an error, and the error, it's telling me that Johnny is not in the sudoers file. This incident will be reported. We can manually set permissions for Johnny to allow him to do this, which we will do in a later video. But for now, you can just use the command su root, which means switch user, and we're gonna switch to root. We are going to be asked for the root password, which we set up during our installation of the server, and now I switched as root. So now you see, before that I was the user Johnny. I'm highlighting here on the left hand side of the screen. After I use the root command, enter the password, now I am the user root. You see also here that Johnny still appears, and this is because I am inside the home directory of Johnny. That's why we still see here Johnny. But if I type in who am I, you will see that I am actually the root user now. So if we want to make Johnny disappear, we can simply type in cd, which will take us to the home directory. The tilde stands for the home directory of the root user. So that's why we still had Johnny here. Now, getting back to our way of updating the Linux operating system, we can just run the command dnf update and press enter. This will take a few seconds to analyze and to go through each and every single repository, so that it can make sure that it gets the updates. And once that is done, we will be prompted with a confirmation menu where we just have to type Y for yes. Now, because the operating system itself has some updates available through the internet, this will take some time. So after several moments, the process of checking the repositories and the internet for the updates has finished. So from the beginning, where we ran the commands, this ran in the background, now we are prompted with a screen to confirm the updates. We could have bypassed this if we would have typed -y on the command, but I actually wanted to illustrate how the screen looks. So now I'm gonna press Y and continue. So hit enter, and this will start the updating process itself. It will download the packages from the web and it will install it. And here we can see that we actually have some updates for the kernel modules. Now this is not the kernel itself, these are just some additional packages required by the kernel, and many more. Everything that you see here are just additional packages. Yes, so pretty much this is the process from back to back on how to install your first Linux operating system on VirtualBox on your computer, or if you want to do this on your laptop, you would have to make a USB bootable device with that ISO file, and you can pretty much repeat the exact same steps. But the new installations that we will have to do in the future, those will be done on a more faster pace. But I wanted to make this first installation a bit more detailed, and that's why it took a bit longer, and mainly this is the reason why this has been kept so long. But we will have explanation of each and every single thing that we will do moving forward inside Linux on separate videos. But the installation part, I thought that it's vital to have it as explained and as detailed as possible, and also to have it in one go. So we are gonna end it up here. I'm just gonna shut down my VM from the terminal, and we are gonna stop here, and on the next video clip we will proceed further with discussing about user accounts, disk partitions, storage in general, how to set up your HTTP server, and many more. So stay tuned, more things will be following shortly. Cheers!